Let's look at another example to illustrate this point. So suppose we're engaged in this very data-driven psychophysics, neurophysiological project of trying to understand cone function. And we want to identify the specific wavelengths that any given cone exhibits sensitivity to. Well, what will we discover? Well, we can identify what's called a selective sensitivity curve. Right? We can discover how, for instance, the S cones with opsin 2 are sensitive to light along this range, and they exhibit a maximum sensitivity right around here. Now, I don't know, at about 4.54 nanometers. We can do the same thing for the medium, the same thing for the large. Right? We can come up with that explanation. But what it doesn't help us to understand is why we have three cones when they overlap in their sensitivities, in some cases significantly. So the medium and long wavelength cones overlap really dramatically. And that means there's a whole bunch of light that they'll respond to in a very similar way. And even with the short range here, this one still, right, has overlapping patterns here and here, for example, with the medium and the long range cones. And so why is it that we have these seemingly redundant overlapping photosensitive cells? Similarly, right, we've seen this picture before from Dale Purves and Bo Lotto's paper from 2002. This picture of a Rubik's Cube, right, well, graphic, with a brown dot on the top and an orange dot on the side. And when we remove the context, we discovered that they look the same. So now I'll play two videos from Lotto. One, just a dynamic illustration of this effect, and the other, a clip of his TED Talk. And we'll look at an example from that talk, and then we'll stop right before we go off into the sort of deeper end of the pool of that talk.
I want to start with a game, okay? And to win this game, all you have to do is see the reality that's in front of you as it really is, all right? So we have two panels here of colored dots, and one of those dots is the same in the two panels, okay? And you have to tell me which one. Now I'll narrow it down to the gray one, the green one, and say the orange one. So by a show of hands, we'll start with the easiest one. Show of hands, how many people think it's the gray one? Really? Okay. How many people think it's the green one? And how many people think it's the orange one? So pretty even split. So let's find out what the reality is. Here is the orange one. Right? Here's the green one. And here's the gray one. So for all of you who saw that, you're complete realists. All right? So this is pretty amazing, actually, isn't it? Because nearly every living system has evolved the ability to detect light in one way or another. So for us, seeing color is one of the simplest things the brain does. And yet, even at this most fundamental level, context is everything. Okay? What I'm going to talk about is not that context is everything, but why is context everything? Because it's answering that question that tells us not only why we see what we do, but who we are as individuals and who we are as a society. But first we have to ask another question, which is, what is color for? And instead of telling you, I'll just show you. What you see here is a jungle scene, and you see the surfaces according to the amount of light that those surfaces reflect. Now, can any of you see the predator that's about to jump out at you? And if you haven't seen it yet, you're dead, right? Can anyone see it? Anyone? No? Now let's see the surfaces according to the quality of light that they reflect. And now you see it, right? So Color enables us to see the similarities and differences between surfaces according to the full spectrum of light that they reflect. But what you've just done is in many respects mathematically impossible. Why? Because, as Berkeley tells us, we have no direct access to our physical world other than through our senses. And the light that falls onto our eyes is determined by multiple things in the world, not only the color of objects, but also the color of their illumination and the color of the space between us and those objects. You vary any one of those parameters, and you'll change the color of the light that falls onto your eye. This is a huge problem because it means that the same image could have an infinite number of possible real-world sources. So let me show you what I mean. Imagine that this is the back of your eye, okay? And these are two projections from the world. They're identical in every single way. Identical in shape, size, spectral content. They are the same as far as your eye is concerned. And yet, they come from completely different sources. The one on the right comes from a yellow surface in shadow, oriented facing the left, viewed through a pinkish medium. The one on the left comes from an orange surface under direct light, facing to the right, viewed through a sort of a bluish medium. Completely different meanings, giving rise to the exact same retinal information. And yet, it's only the retinal information that we get. So how on earth do we even see? So if you remember anything in this next 18 minutes, remember this, that the light that falls onto your eye, sensory information, is meaningless, because it could mean literally anything. And what's true for sensory information is true for information generally.
So if you want to watch that full video, it's a good video, you can get to it by going here, just by searching Lotto TED Talk. So what Lotto expresses there is the same sort of idea that Marr is getting at, that just understanding the function of the individual component parts doesn't really help us to understand, explain, and manipulate our visual processing capacities. So Marr says in your readings on page 4 and 5, the fundamental point is that in order to understand a device that performs an information processing task, one needs many different kinds of explanation. For the subject of vision, there is no single equation or view that explains everything. Each problem has to be addressed from several points of view. As 1, a problem in representing information. As 2, a computation capable of deriving that representation. And as 3, a problem in the architecture of the computer capable of carrying out both things quickly and reliably. In commenting on the previous strategy that he's trying to change, Marr says the following. The message was plain. There must exist an additional level of understanding at which the character of the information processing tasks carried out during perception are analyzed and understood in a way that is independent of the particular mechanisms and structures that implement them in our heads. This was what was missing, the analysis of the problem as an information processing task. Such an analysis does not usurp an understanding of the other levels of neurons or of computer programs, but it is a necessary complement to them, since without it, there can be no real understanding of the function of all those neurons. And finally, it becomes possible by separating explanations into different levels to make explicit statements about what is being computed and why, to construct theories stating that what is being computed is optimal in some sense or is guaranteed to function correctly. So Marr sees computational explanations as involving more than even 2 simple steps, understanding a mechanism, understanding its representations and operations. We have to understand the task itself. What is it that we're trying to accomplish? And how is it that we can leverage information that we get from the world to accomplish that task in a way that is feasible for us, given the sorts of representations and operations we have and the sort of hardware that implements them? So we'll take a look at each of these 3 levels much more closely in the next module.